So good morning and a very warm welcome to Leaders Connect, a platform for authentic conversations hosted by Arca Leadership and in partnership with USP. I'm Subramanian Shankaran, a leadership coach, corporate trainer, and business consultant, enjoying life's journey, juggling its multiple dimensions while seeking to keep it purpose-filled. My mission in life is to make a positive impact through authentic living. That's how my association with Arca Leadership began since its inception at the peak of COVID. A quick brief on Arca Leadership. It's a movement to inspire people to live with authenticity. It's an ecosystem of senior HR leaders and professional coaches who, having experienced the benefits of living in alignment with their inner voice, are partnering to support this movement. One of our key partners in this movement is TOSP Conversations. TOSP Conversations, as most of you are familiar with, is an online platform with leading experts offering cutting-edge perspectives and learning from their fields. The platform partners with global speakers and experts to facilitate conversations on the most pressing concerns and possibilities of the current world on topics ranging from storytelling to boardroom philosophies, digital transformation, diversity, inclusion, policymaking, economic landscape, mental health, amongst others. We in Arca Leadership are grateful to TSP for trusting our vision and agreeing to be a partner and to talk about authentic leadership on a global platform. So what is Leaders Connect and why is there a need for it today? You'll agree that there is tremendous goodness in everyone. And somewhere we have lost sight of that gift. Our vision is to inspire and empower the world to harness and unleash this treasure by sharing stories and having dialogues with some of the most inspiring leaders from across the globe. Leaders Connect is a series of online dialogues with some of the most inspiring leaders from different walks of life, including sports, technology, media, healthcare, marketing, and many more. So our objective is to deep dive into one essential important quality of successful transformation leadership in these sessions, which will define the leadership style of the leaders that we are in conversation with. So we aim to build dialogue around qualities such as authenticity, emotional intelligence, inclusion, trust, courage, compassion, and more. We want to make this collaborative and this platform exciting for global leaders to connect and share ideas. I'd like to also acknowledge our outreach partner, Beyond Diversity, which is a global think tank focusing on diversity and inclusion. They collaborate with institutions and leaders to create inclusive workplaces via consulting, mentoring, creating awareness, etc. Since 2011, they have supported more than 100 organizations across the region and impacted more than 100,000 leaders to promote inclusive leadership. So now we are in the 7th edition of Leaders Connect. And today we have with us Guru Bhatt. Guru Bhatt, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Great pleasure to be here, Subbu.
Same here. A little introduction. Guru Bhatt is the Vice President, Omni-Channel, and the General Manager of PayPal India. He's a technology leader with over 25 years of experience and has been instrumental in driving PayPal's technology strategy in India as the company builds out next-gen payment solutions and services. In his current role, Guru leads the technology centers in Bangalore, Chennai, and Hyderabad, and also leads the product management and engineering teams for PayPal's omni-channel platform. Since joining PayPal in 2015 as the general manager of the Chennai Technology Center, Guru has held several engineering and product leadership roles, including transaction orchestration and planning, merchant data products, dispute resolution experiences, that's an interesting one, and led the development of PayPal's domestic product in India. Prior to joining PayPal, Guru has held several senior leadership roles in Ericsson, Cirrus Corporation, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, and SAP. Guru holds a master's degree in computer science from the State University of New York at Buffalo. So that's a very brief intro on Guru, the professional. We hope to get more insights into Guru, the person, as our connect deepens through the upcoming conversation. So once again, Guru, a hearty welcome to Leaders Connect.
Thank you very much, Subbu.
Yeah. So while reading your profile, you have described yourself as a culture champion who transforms organizational culture and creates high performance, committed, collaborative, passionate, and happy workplaces that are rich in trust and obsessed with delivering customer success. I'm quoting from your profile. Now, that's a rich load for us to kick off our conversation today. So while we are quite familiar with leaders seeking high performance, commitment, collaboration, passion, trust in their team, what piqued my interest in particular is about your making your workplace happy. So please share who and what inspired this particular aspect in your journey as a leader, and how has it turned out for you over this number of years that you've been leading?
Awesome. No, thank you very much, Subbu. First of all, thanks to the entire team behind this for having me here. It's a great pleasure. I always love to expound on these topics, and I'm always in search of a stage to do that. And you guys have given me. I'm very happy for, and to all the audience members who are joining today. So I need to credit Bangalore traffic for this inspiration to make my workplace happy. So, and I'll tell you a little story around how this insight came about. So, as is usual in the life of a Bangalorean, I was stuck in traffic one day. Nothing unusual there. Millions of people in Bangalore are every single day. And my thoughts wandered, as they often want to. And, I started thinking about what is it that I want PayPal to be. And as I thought about the topic, I knew that people love working because, one, they need to provide for their family, for their retirement, for their loved ones, for their healthcare needs, etc. So money is definitely one element that drives a lot of people to do well at work. The second is they like to do meaningful work, definitely, because they want their work to mean something. They want the impact to be quantifiable. They want their resume to get built out better and better so that they can make progress in their lives. But that alone is not enough. I mean, when I reflect back on the happiest years of my life, I realized that I was happiest when I felt the sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of family at my workplace. And I realized that creating a workplace like that is the magic to keeping people engaged and passionate towards what they want to do. So I said, okay, yeah, you know what? I want PayPal to be a happy place. And that's how we, one of the biggest programs that I've launched at PayPal during my term started. Because if you put happy and place together, right in the middle, there's PYPL, which happens to be our ticker symbol. So PYPL is PayPal stock ticker symbol on the NASDAQ. And so we have a program called My Happy Place, which guides us in everything that we do in the India centers. And now I'm happy to say that it also guides people in the Ireland centers and the Philippines centers, and soon in the China centers as well. It's become a global phenomenon now. There's a little bit of branding magic, shall we say, in terms of how we've designed the logo, etc. But it's also the thought behind it is people are happiest when, yes, they're paid well, they're doing good work, but they have the opportunity to create a home at work where they can really truly build connections that allow them to do the best work of their life while having the best time of their life. And so everything is democratized. The cynical among among us might say that I just outsourced my job and crowdsourced it by getting everybody involved. But I think it's one of the best things we've done. We have so much more engagement because people contribute to everything in the centers, right from when we run our transport systems to how we, what kind of food we serve in the cafeteria when we were all in the office. I mean, now, of course, it's a different world. Various things like what events we conduct, how we do the annual day, what clubs we have, when we start Toastmasters clubs, when we have meetings, everything is decided by our employees themselves. So the ideas are all theirs. I maintain some semblance of control over the purse, and that's pretty much it.
Wow, wonderful. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing the fact that traffic, jam can have such a creative output, and that too from Bangalorean. I think this is a lesson, first lesson for us today, that yeah, make the most of these traffic snarls. There is so much that one can benefit from. And the second point that I heard is talk about the fact that people could accuse you of outsourcing and crowdsourcing and reducing your workload. It reminds me of the fact one of the things that a leader is considered to be is like a yeast, which rises with the bread, right? So you are doing the job of a yeast very effectively. That's what I would say, right? Now, let's quickly move to the nub of today's theme, right? Just continuing from that top. Great idea, happy workplace, and the fact that you managed to get your ticker to match that, that's a brilliant creative stroke, I must say. As a successful entrepreneur of over 2 decades, how consciously have you gone about building culture of entrepreneurship in your teams?
So it's a very often bandied about the term entrepreneurship, because there's obviously a lot of goodness around it, right? Like you picture an organization where everybody is being very entrepreneurial, but from the inside, on behalf of the company, etc. While one would be very tempted to add along tags like innovation and all of that, right, into it. But if I were to distill the very essence of what makes an entrepreneurial or an intrapreneurial workplace, why would somebody want to do it? What does it truly indicate, right? When you look at employees and they want to be entrepreneurial, yes, of course, there is an element of them wanting to make progress in their own careers. Maybe they want to derive the satisfaction of getting to the next level, the next title or whatever. Yes. But oftentimes, some of these entrepreneurial activities don't have a direct straight line correlation to any such progress, but still they happen in organizations. It could be something very simple around the workplace, like an idea to start an innovation lab. Why do people even take the trouble to do that? Right? Because at the time that they're making that effort, there is no straight line between that activity and progress for themselves. So one could be tempted to say, if you're selfish, why would you even do that? Because you don't have a steady ROI on that. The underlying factor is, if there is enough trust, if there is deep trust up and down, sideways, left to right, every which way inside the organization, people feel like that is theirs, right? It is their baby. And when something is your baby, you don't look at what's in it for you. You look at what's in it for the baby. And that's how people behave in entrepreneurial organizations. And I would say that the first step for a leader is to create a workplace that is replete in trust, infused with tremendous amount of trust across the board, so that people can truly treat everything surrounding work as their baby. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things a leader can do, to see how transparency, openness, a sense of all of us being in it together, a sense of I've got your back, you should have my back. That should be the pervasive sentiment inside the organization. And when that happens, I think innovation, entrepreneurship, engagement, high performance, all of those just flow from there. A learning culture. If you don't have trust, then you could be shooting in the dark at what the basic problem is and trying to solve all sorts of things, getting very highly paid consultants to come in and analyze your processes, but you're not going to get anywhere.
True. Very well said. In fact, what I hear you say is that trust is the most important input, right? For anything to emerge meaningfully from that endeavor. And in fact, it reminds me of this book that I read, Robert Messier. He has written a book on the trusted advisor, where he actually comes up with a formula on what is trust. Just just an aside. I heard you say trust, and you talked about what is in it for me. So he talks about trust being building blocks are three. The numerator is credibility, reliability, and intimacy. And the denominator is self-orientation, right? So it resonates well with what you say, that if people have a larger purpose to work towards, their self-orientation is for the larger self rather than their own inner smaller self, That means a larger cost takes always the front seat.
That's
Then
right.
the other ingredients sort of automatically blend into it and integrate into all those outputs that we talked about: innovation, collaboration, and a conflict-free, constructive working environment. I think that goes very strong with it. So what has enabled you, because you have been with PayPal now for about 4 or 5 years. So how did you go about building the trust? What were those ingredients that you had to initially start off with, which got this culture, made this such a strong motivating factor in your teams? So,
I think there are many different ingredients, Subbu, but I would say that as somebody who has the privilege to serve, I don't like to use the word leader. I think leader is a very grand sounding term that kind of sometimes adds distance between you and the person who you're working with and actually serving, right? So I would say that I have a privilege to serve so many people at PayPal, and one of the best ways to infuse trust in the system is if the person who has maybe the highest title is also the most accessible person in the organization. That in itself brings about a phenomenal amount of trust. So, by nature, I'm a very gregarious person, and I love meeting people and interacting with people. So it comes naturally to me. It's not that, I want to claim that I've done something great. This is who I am. And that's the best part about, why my job appeals to me, because I just can bring my authentic self to work every day. And that's exactly what the job needs. So I think for all leaders, making yourself as accessible as possible so that nobody feels afraid to reach out to you, right? In fact, any leadership team should always operate on this principle that people should never be afraid of you. They should never be afraid, oh my God, I'm afraid to ask for time on this person's calendar. I'm afraid to send them a mail. What will they think? That should never cross the mind of any employee in the organization. It should not cross the mind of anybody in the building, to be honest. Even the security guard at the gate should feel totally empowered to come and reach out to you and tell you what's on their mind. That's the kind of culture, right? They should be afraid to disappoint you. They should not be afraid of you, right? And that's if you make yourself that accessible, then information flows freely. As somebody with the privilege of having a relatively visible job, if you do that, then other people take cues from it and they start doing it as well because they perceive that to be the ideal behavior. If you don't do it, correspondingly, they will take those cues as well, and they will also adjust accordingly. So I think leaders have the privilege of being able to wield outsized influence, and they should do that very mindfully. So accessibility is one, right? Being very accessible. The second is you need to hire people not just based on how good they are at their work, but also how good they are as human beings. I mean, I think most interviews perhaps don't look at this element carefully enough. Is this person going to come and add to our culture? Are they going to infuse greater trust, or are they going to draw from the trust and subtract from it? These are elements that you should be carefully looking at every level, because while it's easy to look at a leader and say, oh my God, everything finally devolves to leadership, not true. A leader is just one small spoke in the wheel. Everybody in the organization has an equal role in building organizational culture. And so you should be very mindful about hiring the best people. So you bring in leaders who set the tone and walk the talk. You bring in employees who are good human beings and want to do good things in the world. Everything else is coachable and learnable. Programming is not rocket science. You can always learn it. New languages are not, new frameworks are not. So those things can be learned. But this element of being a good person, that stems from somewhere deep inside. And that may be much harder to teach and learn.
Very well said. Very well said. In fact, that resonates again with this idea of the whole idea of authenticity, right?
Yes.
Authenticity is all about the inside out. You can't change what is already there within a person. If you're able to find the right match between what you value as an organization with what the person values as a person, then you've got a great fit. Yes, yeah. All these discipline and all these words don't mean anything because people do it because they are willingly doing it.
That's right.
And you also mentioned the fact that skills can be easily thought, but willingness and engagement is always that. We call it the feather. You have to blow hard to keep the feather in the air. So willingness is similar. It's not easy to keep the willingness and the engagement of people up. And in fact, that brings out to this point that the COVID has been an extraordinary event in all our lives, without exception. And some people quote it as we are all in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. Each person has been able to ride the storm in different ways. Some people are sunk, some people are floundering. Now, in an organization during the COVID, there is a distinct need for more compassionate, creative, as well as collaborative leaders. I mean, all that an authentic leadership is all about. I have to use the word leadership, excuse me, because that's a common word. So, but I respect the fact that you did mention that it's all about serving. I agree completely. So what has been the experience in managing this particular time? Because at this time, you're going to see people in their most vulnerable moments. There are so many challenges that people are facing. So how has it been for you and your team during this last year and a quarter?
So it's been a dichotomy for us, Subbu. So if you look at one side, right, we are very fortunate as a company to be reaping the wind right now that is blowing very hard in our direction from a digital transformation perspective, because we are a born digital company. And so as the world turns increasingly digital, especially in payment experiences, we have been a net beneficiary of that trend. And so as a business, we have done phenomenally well the last year. We are a behemoth in the world of payments, the original digital payments company, and we have that length of tenure in the industry and the kind of trust we have built stood us in excellent stead when the pandemic came on board. So on one hand, you've got a company where the sheer amount of work that every employee had to do to serve our customers has gone up, because we had to, the world turned to us with urgency because the products were more relevant than ever before and they needed more from us. That meant that every employee had the job of actually churning out products at a much faster rate. So I would say that without any exception across the board in PayPal, it has been one of the busiest years for us. And on the other side, we are not immune to the pandemic either. Though the company may be doing well, the world isn't. And so all of us have been necessarily working from home. And a lot of our culture is extremely people-centric. So for me, for example, I rely on walking around every opportunity to just interact with people. I take it. I would, even if I'm just walking from my desk to the cafeteria, I would meet 10, 15 people, have an opportunity to ask them how they're doing, very casual, completely unstructured engagements and discussions. And that has completely gone away, not just for me, but for members of my staff, people who are managers, etc., and even colleagues interacting with each other, right? Everything, there's a degree of formality now. You have to set up a meeting. Yes. And there is definitely fatigue around being in front of a screen the whole day. It is not the same thing. So we've tried to use our communication channels to keep a sense of connection alive. I am blessed with some really creative people on my team who have had some really interesting competitions they've been running to bring people closer together. For example, last year during August, when pandemic fatigue was probably peaking and the number of cases were also peaking at that time, and coincidentally with the India's Independence Day coming on board, one of my team members had this wonderful idea saying, probably one of the most deepest felt needs in people is the need to travel. So why don't we have a competition for people to put their best travel photographs from their own trips? We use Microsoft Teams, we use Slack. So they created and it saw tremendous engagement. People kept putting these photographs of all the different wonderful places, and I think vicariously as a team, we lived those moments with them. We relived those moments with them, created a lot of engagement. Then there was another competition around black and white photos. There was one more around healthy meals, etc. So the challenge is that in a virtual world, you have to keep coming up with new ideas to bring people closer together. And it's not easy. You have to gamify it. You have to make this as crowdsourced as possible. And on the other side, I think from an HR policy perspective, have very, very kind and generous policies in terms of people being able to take time off, realizing that they're playing multiple roles inside the same house as a colleague, an employee, as a mom, as a dad, as a caregiver, etc. Right? So we've definitely had a plethora of policies that we put in place. And one more that we did was we've always had this concept of a wellness mentor, a person who employees can reach out to, schedule time to talk about problems that are going on in their lives. It could be mental health issues, etc. And this is a qualified psychotherapist who's available to our employees. We increased coverage of that. We increased the number of sessions that this person is able to give us as far as PayPal goes, and those have been wildly popular. In fact, there is tremendous demand for such services right now during the pandemic compared to any other time. And I know that it's a very hard time, and we are doing our best. But can I claim that I enjoy this way of working? Absolutely not. I can't wait for a day when I go back to the office and actually I'm able to shake hands with my colleagues, smile at them, see the happiness in their eyes. I miss all of that very, very dearly.
Very true. Very true. I think I can share that with you very strongly, because in my role as a corporate trainer, facilitator, coach, I miss this warm body interaction quite strongly. Even this particular interview, I would love to have sat in front of you, and the energy that I can feel, the energy that you have, but I would have enjoyed it even more if we were sitting face to face. That would have been wonderful, and preferably with an audience also that we could see.
That's right.
But yes, we have to, like you rightly said, adapt ourselves to the changing times. So now all this that you talked about, these are all coming from your PayPal experiences, but you have had a fairly long run as a in the digital world and in leadership roles. All these creativity, all this idea towards more humane approach to leading people, being more a partner, treating people like a family. This is what I keep hearing from what you're saying so far. Where does this all originate from? What is your inspiration? Who has inspired you? How did these thoughts come about?
So I've had the benefit of standing on the shoulders of giants, I would say. Throughout my career, I cannot recall a single manager that I haven't really loved, right? Like I've had the real good fortune of working for people that have truly been much, much better than me. So, but I'd probably say there was a turning point in my life when I truly looked at work very differently. So I'll confess that much like many other people, right, there was a large part of my life where I was quite fixated on the visible indicators of success. And visibly, people always look at how big is my title, how good does it sound, what is the kind of car I drive or whatever, right? There are many, many things that people are usually obsessing over. And I'll give you a little bit of background to myself. So, I've had a completely middle-class upbringing. Both my parents are doctors. And here's the interesting fact. My parents are both doctors. They are in their late 70s. And they happen to live in a little temple town called Dharmasthala in Karnataka. And this year marks the 31st year of their life where they have dedicated their life to charitable service. So they have been working in hospitals that do not charge patients anything for the service that they receive, or they allow the patients to only pay as much as they can afford to pay with no obligation to pay anything at all. And my parents have been doing this for 31 years now. And I had never really thought about it too much other than knowing that it was always my dad's dream to do charitable work. And right now 31 years is a long time, right? Yes. And it is a life of service. And so in 2014 there was an NGO along with the government of Karnataka that decided to felicitate them for their life and service. And I was at Ericsson at that time. We were in the audience, my wife and I and my children, and we had my parents up on stage. It was a beautiful ceremony, and they had they had all the it was a moment of a lot of pride for me. And then the organizer, gentleman on stage, asked my dad to speak, and he said, "Doctor, can you please tell us why you do this and how you're able to do this?" And that's when I realized that I had never asked my dad that question. I had kind of taken it as one of the facts of life that my dad wants to do it without delving deeper into why he wants to do it. So my dad went up on stage and he said, "Look, I'm not much of a speaker. There is one person in my house who can't keep his mouth shut, but he's inside in the audience right now." And he pointed at me. And then he said, "Look, because all of you want to know, I'll tell you that I'm not some great individual who's doing something extraordinary. People, if they were given similar opportunities like I have been given, they would all be able to do this." But he called out one aspect of his personality that was very different from most people that he had seen. So he said this thing that fundamentally altered the way I look at things. He said, from when he has memories, from when he was a little child, he does not remember a single day where he wanted more than he had. He said God gave him the boon of contentment very early in his life, which opened up his mind to be able to do things in service of others rather than in service of himself. Then a lot of things made sense for me, because if I look at my dad, he's one of the most chilled out people I know. He's never worried about anything. He is not constantly in search of a bigger house or a better car, or whatever the outward manifestations and trappings of a successful life are. He is content but extremely ambitious and aspirational, as you put it, during a recent conversation of ours, Subbu. He aspires to serve more people. He is ambitious to bring the best of medical care to the people that he serves, but he is content about what he has for himself. And that fundamentally changed the way I look at things. And the word altruism truly struck a chord. And I can't claim any measure of greatness even close to what my parents have achieved in their life. Nobody is going to hold my kids' hands and say, "Oh my God, your dad saved our life." That's never going to happen, but it happens regularly to me. Strangers will come up to me on the street when I go to back to my hometown, and they'll hold my hand saying, "Your dad is like a god to us." So but in spite of that, I think this aspect of self-awareness, where you know what truly drives you and makes you happy, that I think has been a fundamental learning that shifted my balance completely in what I look for in a workplace, what I want to do to impact people. That has been a fundamental underpinning of my leadership style, I would say, from then onwards.
Excellent. So you actually, if you think about it, you have an unfair advantage over other leaders, that you have it in your DNA, right? It's already there. So all it required was the natural blossoming at the right time, and that's what we are able to see in whatever you have shared so far about how you have managed people and what drives you in managing people and focusing on the happiness and the joy. And now this the idea of contentment, which I think is such a powerful idea. And hats off to your parents. Thanks for sharing the fact that they are living such an altruistic life and enjoying it also in the process. That's most important. That's what we talk about, the mojo. Are you enjoying what you're doing? Right? Great. So, I mean, we will be inviting questions from the audience very soon. I have just one thought, because what you're busy developing in your organization, culture, if you want to call it that, that's a very robust one. You talked about creating an environment where people feel that they are part of a family, people enjoy what they're doing, they're happy doing what they're doing. Now, how do you ensure that the culture survives in the long run? What steps are you taking in that direction? Because typically we are seeing things getting disrupted when there's a change in the leadership, change in that inspiration from these inspiring people. And if the inspiring person is no longer around, it can sort of slowly peter away. So what have you planned to ensure that this is an enduring legacy and not just driven by your presence?
And so one of the things, Subbu, is as tempting as it may be for all of us to assume we are indispensable, I think one of the first things a leader has to come to terms with very early in his or her journey is the aspect of our dispensability. So we are extremely dispensable at all times in our careers, and that's something that should be guiding us. And in fact, I would say that we should be striving to make that dispensability even greater for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons, not by becoming incompetent and horrible that people want to get rid of you, but by making sure that people around you are so much better than you that you leaving will have no impact at all whatsoever, right? And so if so the first thing for me was to be able to constantly talk about what kind of culture that we need to build inside the organization in as many settings as possible. The stories that I'm telling you, if some of the listeners from PayPal tune in, they're probably like, oh my God, Guru has already talked about all this, right? Because I think certain things bear reiterating and repeating because it needs to sink in, it needs to start becoming the norm. And the aspect of always having this sense of paying it forward, making sure that others benefit from the work that you do is something that should just seep so deep into your core DNA in terms of being an organization that it should become the norm. And so a lot of this is by constantly reiterating these facts. The second is to give as many opportunities as possible to people to practice these virtues and then make heroes out of people who do, right? And I'll give you people are probably looking at my background in this meeting and wondering what this is all about, right? Why do I have this particular background? One, last month was International Women's Day, very strong area of focus for me as an individual. Diversity and inclusion is something that I live and breathe every day. And so I made that my background. And though we are well into April, it's a hangover from last month, I would say. But this particular initiative, I'm proud to say, had nothing to do with me, as in it did not have any input from me, but it's one of the most meaningful ones that we've launched. So Bloom with PayPal is an initiative where we are looking at underprivileged girls across the spectrum, especially those who are first-time learners, perhaps, in their families, people who have the opportunity to graduate for the very first time in their extended families. We are looking at finding women like that in women students in various colleges across Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, and Andhra Pradesh, where we have centers. And we want to uplift them by equipping, enabling, and empowering them, as the tagline goes, basically by giving them hard skills like programming and technology, but also looking at getting them interview ready, because many of these small colleges and people from an underprivileged background, there is a certain deficit in terms of confidence when it comes to approaching an interview. And their backgrounds don't make it easy for them, right? They have never encountered situations where they have to be in a hot seat in front of people who are intimidating, they're being quizzed about the knowledge they have about something. Even though they may be knowledgeable, the nervousness might come in the way of them being able to present themselves appropriately, right? So we want to be in a position to help them. And this has nothing to do with PayPal, as in we are not doing this because we are going to hire them into PayPal. We might hire many of them into PayPal, but we are doing this so that they get qualified to be able to apply to any company. And so that's a program that came up from within the ranks. Employees in my organization came up with the idea. They came up with the tagline, the branding, even the logo, which is so beautiful, was completely created by our employees. The only time when I got involved was they said, we need this budget to be able to make this happen. And what a beautiful feeling it is when you feel so unneeded, where nobody needed you to review anything, nobody needed you to come in with any idea, and you just had to sign on the check. That's it, right? And I think that to me is a sign that the culture is getting built the right way. And this is just one example, Subbu. There are so many examples I can give you of my irrelevance within the organization, I would say. Yeah, so many things are happening where I have no input whatsoever, and the only thing I get to feel is the pride in the fact that my team is doing it without me being involved, and that's beautiful.
Truly well said. In fact, You sound like a grand old, fatherly figure who's now sitting back, putting his hands and saying, "All my children are taken over charge, and there's nothing to worry." It's a good feeling. And earlier you had mentioned about accessibility. You said that that's one of the key aspects. Now you run a very large ship, right? And it's not easy for somebody in your position, because managing people is one dimension of your work. There are other things as well. There's other work that you do. Now, how do you ensure the accessibility? What creative ideas have come up for you to manage this accessibility?
Oh, there's one favorite of mine. So I will. So I'm. Most people, if they were to ask, if they were asked about one thing that they distinctly feel I am, it's that I'm accessible, because I'm constantly reaching out to people. And thankfully, somehow by some quirk of brain wiring, I have an incredible ability to remember names. So I'm really grateful for that. At any given point in time in the organization, I can remember about 1,500 names of people and faces. And that helps very, very much in the role that I play, right? So when I joined PayPal, one of the things I was always looking out for, it's a new organization, it's a large organization, finding avenues to connect with people. They might find it weird if I just randomly put a meeting on their thing saying, "Hey, I want to meet you, just come and meet me." It probably will be a little intimidating. They won't know how to come prepared. There's a certain barrier, and that might come in the way. So I was looking at what are creative ways I can do this. So there have been a few things I've done, but one that I can tell you about was I wanted to see if I can instill a learning culture, because I think the speed at which the world is moving is incredibly fast, but it'll never be as slow as it is now, because it's only getting faster. And our knowledge becomes irrelevant really fast. So as a company, if you want to go from good to great, the only thing you can focus on is not what you've already learned, but what you are going to learn. And so what I did was, every week I carved aside 4 hours on my calendar and said, anybody in the center can come in and reach out to me, ask for time, and come in and meet me. And the way I kicked this effort off was by sending a mail where, in big, bold, I don't know, like 72-point font, in bold red letters, were the words, "I don't know." And I said that, let me start off by saying I don't know anything. There are lots of things. There are many books that have been written about things that I don't know and will continue to be written. But I want to know. I want you to come and teach me. So I have 4 hours in my calendar, and if needed, I'll give more as well. You can come in, ask for time in 30, 45 minute, 60-minute blocks. The only caveat is, if you're asking my time, you should come and teach me something. And in return, I will teach you something as well. And given that I have a name like Guru, it lends itself to a certain amount of playfulness. So the program was called "Be a Guru to Guru." And
Okay.
it was phenomenally well accepted, and I've had the pleasure and privilege of meeting so many of my colleagues who set up these G2G, as the short form goes, sessions, and they've taught me a bunch of stuff, like how to program in Python, or how to look at a log file and derive the right insights from it. And in some cases, one gentleman came in and said that he's going to teach me the beauty of heartfulness. So we actually turned off the light and sat down cross-legged on each of our chairs, and closed our eyes and meditated. Somebody tried to teach me yoga, a notoriously unflexible person like me. And I don't know what he learned out of it. I just learned the limits of my own stretchability during that session. And then multiple others. So it has been brilliant. And then I also have one more. When our offices were open, it's a program called Connect Over Cuisine. Every 2 weeks, lunch is on me, the perspective is on them. 20 of us get together in a room. I give them the option of ordering their favorite meal from anywhere they want, and we get that meal for them. They join me, and we just have an open, freewheeling discussion. And then I also make a nuisance of myself every day in the cafeteria. I go and join a new team at their table. That's why I miss the office being open so much, because I had the ability to really pester people like this. So whether they like it or not, they get the pain of my company during lunch, and I pick up a lot of stuff that's going on in the organization during those sessions.
Wonderful. These are truly creative and unique ideas, Guru. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening or watching and will be watching in the future, they'll be inspired with these ways to keep their team engaged. Now, I have some questions that have come, or at least one I can immediately see. There's a gentleman, Rajat, is asking a question which I'll share with you. He says, is there a downside to having too many entrepreneurs in the organization?
I would say no. I would say that it's never a bad thing to have everybody trying to do something to improve the system in some way. Right now, the downside will be if you don't have a fair and open and transparent process to adjudicate what gets taken forward and what doesn't and why. Right? If you're able to explain to people why you're going to invest in one idea and not in another, in a way that tells them what your decision making is based on, that there is no bias or favoritism there, they will learn from it and even come back with even better ideas, because they will understand what the mechanism that you use to prioritize one versus the other. If you don't have that, then yes, then you will have a huge problem if you have a lot of entrepreneurs. But if you have this openness and transparency in figuring out why something gets done and why something doesn't, then it's absolutely fine, because over time, those who don't have it in them will not become entrepreneurs, and they will just drop off and they'll focus on what they need to do. Those who have it in them will only get better, because their ideas will become distilled and focused and even sharper. So what's to lose?
I'm curious, based on what you've shared about the way you've been engaging with your teams over the last few years, what kind of a metric is your employee engagement currently showing? I can't avoid asking this question.
Yeah, no, there are a few things that we measure very steadily and regularly, and I'm really proud of the India centers, because our engagement is in the high 90s.
Wow.
And each of the centers is different. So the Chennai center, which is where I started my career at PayPal, has always been traditionally high, because the culture there is a very familial culture, which is where people get very close to each other. There's a sense of family that is baked into the culture of the native the population there itself, right? So that in itself. But a cosmopolitan place like Bangalore, culture and engagement is a harder problem to crack, because there are numerous opportunities. People are from different places. There's a certain mercenariness to the way people move from one company to another. So engagement is not, I would say, something that many companies in Bangalore can pride themselves about.
Yes.
And for us, we were suffering in Bangalore, actually. And then, once all these programs and the entire culture pivoted towards one of openness and transparency and deep familial participation, we've gotten into the high 90s in Bangalore as well. And one measure that, again, is something that I should be thanking my team for is attrition. In the tech industry, attrition in the high teens or in the early 20s is not at all surprising. Many people have it. But at PayPal, the last 3 years, we've exited at 6.5 to 7% attrition across the board in India. And that is something that makes me sleep really well at night.
Yes, indeed. Okay, that's brilliant. That's brilliant to know. Yeah, very good. In fact, when you keep using the word familial, I was just thinking that if you think about it, most people spend more than 50% of their working life, if you want to call it, from their 20 till their maybe 60s. A good percentage of the time is spent in the workplace, right? More than how much time they spend with their own spouses, partners, children. And if leaders start understanding the need to create an environment which is familial, which is comfortable, which is joyful, then all these buzzwords around leadership, followership, collaboration, conflict management, everything will become history, because it will become a natural process rather than something that requires an outside-in approach. So I think that has been a very enlightening aspect of this conversation so far with you. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead.
So there's one element, the one story that I want to tell,
Please.
which I think is also very important because, um, especially in the tech industry, Subbu, and I'm not sure to what extent your listeners are going to be only from the tech industry, but I would say the tech industry is privileged to be very needed in the world today. But that need also brings a sense of entitlement.
Yes.
There's a sense of wanting to be paid a certain amount, wanting to be given a certain amount of cutting edge work to do. And if one of these characteristics is not true about their role, then people feel perfectly entitled to feel disengaged, right? And I had not paid much thought to this until one afternoon at Ericsson when I had a very, very interesting and one of the best learning experiences I've had in my life. So it was a day like any other, and there was, it was a day full of meetings. Roughly around 4 in the evening, I needed to take a break. So I went to the restroom, wanted to use, some water, and I was definitely feeling sleepy. And so as I walked in, the janitor who was taking care of the restroom he was just beginning to wind up his day. I think his shift was ending and the next guy was going to come in. So he was carefully folding his apron, keeping it back into the cupboard, etc. And while he was doing that, I was just liberally splashing water all over my face. And given that I am encumbered by a Y chromosome in my DNA, I have the tendency to make a lot of mess around the bathroom sink, I suppose. So there was a lot of water that splashed around. And the next thing I know, I turn around and I see this guy is putting his uniform back again.
Okay.
And very carefully, he starts to wipe the place clean again. He takes his mop and uses it on the floor. And then the sink also, he takes a few tissues and starts wiping it. And I was very struck by this because he was ready to leave. And I remember his name still. His name is Munikrishna. I don't know where he is today, but he really taught me a lesson. And so I asked him, I said, isn't your shift over? And, this was this was a conversation that went on in Kannada. And, so much may be lost in translation, but I'll try to preserve the essence of it. So he said, no, I'm done with my shift. So I said, then why did you come back? And he said, I don't like anybody to point fingers at me that I left a bathroom not clean when I left my shift. Right? So to me, that really, I mean, I was rocked back on my heels that day, right? Because I said, look, this guy does not have a fundamentally interesting job, right? Quote unquote. Like it's not like his job is filled with innovative new things that he has to do every day. He's cleaning bathrooms. He is not highly paid. In fact, he's probably at the very low end of what somebody in an organization gets paid. But look at the commitment the guy has, that when he puts his signature on something, he wants to be able to say that nobody can point fingers at him. Now, how many of us in our entitled jobs feel that way? There are so many times where I've caught myself saying, oh my God, this boring Excel spreadsheet, I have to fill it up. Or, oh my God, this PowerPoint presentation, it's so boring. This is not very interesting work. Why am I doing this? That is crazy, because if Munikrishna, who is not paid well, who is doing a boring job, has such pride in his work, can any of us not have the right to not have pride in our jobs? I don't think so. I think we, shame on us if we don't have pride in our work to that extent, right? So that was a lesson for me. And this is one that I tell my engineers as well. It's like, does Sachin Tendulkar say that when I'm playing a Ranji Trophy bowler, I reserve the right to get out at 0 because it's boring to play somebody who's not qualified to bowl to me? No, he will want to hit a century even there.
Yes.
That's how we should lead our lives, where every element of our work is so important to us that we do our best job no matter what. And it has nothing to do with how much you're getting paid. It has nothing to do with the title you have. It has everything to do with who you see yourself as and how much pride you take in yourself.
Very well said. Absolutely. It is a mindset. Excellence is a habit. All these things in this story, it stands out. I mean, what more example do you need? At that level of monotony, if a man is so persistent about the quality that he gives, that is something remarkable. Definitely. Completely aware. We have one more question that's come up. I think we have time for a few more minutes. Just the question is entrepreneurship a personal trait only, or should organizations also need to spend time restructuring job descriptions in a way that give room for entrepreneurship?
The latter. It is, it is tempting to think of it as a personality trait, but if you look deep into your lives, I think all of us have some bone of entrepreneurship in us at all times. I mean, it's a very big word, right? It conjures up these images of starting a company, being able to go and raise capital, being able to put these pitch decks to be able to sell your idea. It's not that. It's about making a small incremental iterative change that makes your life better. And I'm sure all of us have done this in our own daily lives. Whether it is putting a shelf in our house that allows us to organize something better, or looking at some tap that is leaking and coming up with some jugaad to stop the leaking. These are all, these are all cases where you don't put up your hands and say, I don't know how to solve it. You actually get involved with the problem enough to solve it yourself. And I'll give you a fantastic example of one entrepreneurial activity that happened. And you might think that I'm kind of obsessed with the bathroom, because this again goes back to it. But this was back in 2018, I think it was, where Bangalore was facing a severe crisis in terms of water. And in our office, we have these push button taps where you push the button and there's a spring action that slowly releases the spring.
Yes.
And as long as that happens, the water is flowing.
The water continues to flow. Yeah.
It comes back, it stops, right? Now, this spring action that we had a problem. It was very slow. So during that time, you're already done washing your hands, you're already drying your hand, but the water is still continuing to flow because that is painfully slow, the spring action.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of people, and this became a big topic of conversation within our internal communication channels. Engineers were, the millennials who are justifiably very concerned about the planet, were ranting and raving. This is atrocious. We are wasting so much water. Why can't we remove all of these taps and put in these, optical sensor based ones, etc., etc. And then we were looking at it, roughly about 32 restrooms per floor. If you multiply it across 6 floors, that's a hell of a cost. Where are we going to find this money from, and all of that? And again, a janitor came to our rescue, one of our facilities person. He said he's got a very simple solution. You need these plastic ties that come wrapped around bags in order to, or your suitcases in the airport for security, they put it around the lock.
Yeah.
So he went in and put this under every tap in the space between the button and the spring. Right? He just put that in. So when you push the button, it only goes that far because there's this plastic thing impeding it now. Completely for the grand total of about 5 rupees, we solved the problem across the building. Right? That's how much that packet of those ties cost. And if something breaks, you can always go and put one more. No problem, no need for any optical sensor. All these highly qualified engineers could not solve the problem this guy did. Why? Because he was entrepreneurial, and because innovation requires a couple of things. One, deep involvement in the problem, where you are observing the conditions around every day and know what it takes. And second, you have skin in the game to solve it. You are there doing this every day, and you are able to do it. The minute he was able to do it, everybody said, "Oh my God, that was so simple. Why didn't I think about it?"
Yes.
So is it a problem for us to have too many entrepreneurs? I would say no.
No.
You should definitely have a way to put this in people's KRAs or their goals for the year, saying, I'm not going to put pressure on you saying, you know what, I'll not give you a raise if you don't do this. But you will certainly get a halo if you are able to say, I did one innovative thing this year. It could be something simple, but you should have pride in it and be able to say why it was important, how much, what it did, what it solved, and how it helped other people. That will be great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the last key word, is what value it has added to people. Right?
Yes.
Innovation is truly innovative. True innovativeness is when there is value to the user, and that's what people who at any level should be focusing on. I completely resonate with that. Thank you so much for that, Guru. We are on the hour, just about a minute to go. So let me just thank you for this amazing and enlightening conversation, Guru. You have demonstrated that leadership can be fun. provided there is the inner urge to leave this enduring legacy of joy and happiness in wherever you work. And I recollect a definition of leadership that Paz mentioned here, which is leadership is about making others feel and do better as a result of your presence and ensuring that the impact lasts in your absence.
That's right. Yes.
So a culture of entrepreneurship requires creative, passionate, innovative, and authentic leadership who leads by example. And I think, Guru, you have amply demonstrated that in your stories and experiences and the creativity that has gone behind every initiative that you've taken. And we will definitely watch your continuing success.
Thank you.
Of happiness and joy, and wish you a wonderful journey ahead. And thank you for joining us, giving us your time. And I'd like to finally, on behalf of Arka Leadership, convey our deepest gratitude to ESOB for providing this super platform to present our themes about authentic leadership. We are also grateful to our partners in our Leader Connect sessions so far, that includes NASSCOM, Shiros, Ascent Foundation, Beyond Diversity, and the Center for Transformational Coaching. Our conversations, as always, are enriched by stimulating questions from the audience, and we thank you all for making time on a precious weekend and staying with us through the conversation. Have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.